Coming up on Yellow Chair Collective, the podcast.
That's it. And we're just so scared that we don't belong, that someone's rejecting us, that we're not enough. And I just need to keep telling myself I'm more than enough.
That's good.
A lot of my worthiness has stemmed from my body shape. And guess what? I'm a pear. I am a pear. And I do
sexy
not look
pear.
Good. I do not look good in a Vietnamese ao dai. So here's what I did, girl. Listen up. I never really went shopping because I always thought I'd lose that extra 15 pounds.
We're Yellow Chair Collective, a passionate psychotherapist group based in California and New York. But Yellow Chair Collective has a deeper meaning too. Yellow Chair is a place of hope and enlightenment for other Asian Americans. We're a team of specialized therapists where each clinician at Yellow Chair Collective has particular areas of expertise and practice. Listen to Yellow Chair Collective, the podcast, for more inspiring mental health content on how to further your growth as an individual. Let's get started. All right, Susan, welcome to Yellow Chair Collective, the podcast. We have author Susan Lieu of The Manicurist's Daughter on the show. I did appreciate, so I think it was either your assistant or a publicist sent me the synopsis of the book. And I just want to read what the publishing company wrote in this letter. So they said, when Susan was 11 years old, her mother, a manicurist, went in for plastic surgery, a tummy tuck, the narrowing of her nostrils, and a chin implant, figuring she would be home for the next day with her beautiful new body. 2 hours into the operation, she lost oxygen to her brain. 14 minutes passed before the surgeon finally called 911. She died 5 years later. For the next 20 years.
5 days
later. Days later. For the next 20 years, Susan navigated a series of cascading questions alone. Why did the most perfect person in her life want to change her body? And I can go on, but I think like the first two paragraphs just really caught my attention. But I do want to go into just a general overview and question of, at 11 years old, was it told to you in the amount of graphic detail of what happened to your mom, or was it just a general blanket statement of she died from surgery?
Yeah, it was, she died from stomach surgery.
Yeah.
And I never actually knew the extent of what happened until I was in my 30s on the brink of motherhood, realizing I didn't know my mother. How could I become one myself? That I would even search for these answers because for the next 3 decades, my family has never spoken about my mother ever again or how she died. And so it's been forbidden to speak about her and what happened. And so actually, I didn't know any of this. And that copy you read, actually, I wrote it. And it was, it's part of it is a synopsis that I was using for the one woman show I eventually would come to create, 140 Pounds, How Beauty Killed My Mother. That was it was kind of like the copy to be like, this is what the show is about. And so we folded it in and I worked with the publisher to really lay out what the back of the book was going to look like. Yeah.
I do want to just thank you for the amount of vulnerability it probably took to write this book, because as soon as I read what you wrote, I immediately started to go through the Rolodex of my memories with my mother and how beauty from a white person's lens was all we talked about and all we focused on. And the poundage that I was, even as a 5th grader at your age, or the age that you were when you found out your mom died, was very apparent. I remember getting weighed in 5th grade, and my seatmate was like, Helen, you're 100 pounds? Like, how can you be 100 pounds? Like, you're so fat. And how that stuck with me for a long time. And I was actually talking to my boyfriend about it a couple weeks ago, how weight, a lot of ways I still have to catch those thoughts. And even as a mental health professional, it's hard to grasp how deep and wide it is. Where are you based, Susan?
I'm based in Seattle, Washington, but I'm from the Bay Area. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I grew up in Los Angeles, and I was listening to a conversation with these two women about their weight. And it was almost like, after reading a little bit of your book, I haven't finished all of it, but after reading a little bit of it, I started to notice how pervasive like body language is, like literal body language
Yeah.
is in our culture.
Yeah. Yeah, how
Yeah.
often it's like a greeting, which is like for elders, it's the first observation. "Oh my god, you gained a lot of weight. Oh my god, you lost a lot of weight." It's never, "Hey, how are you, like, doing? How are you feeling? What's making you feel alive?" It's more, "Let me judge what I can see because dot, 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 here it is." Our bodies are so tied to our worthiness.
Mm,
And I remember after my mom died about a year later, I was reaching for a second bowl of rice, and my dad and aunt stopped me and they said, "Whoa, if you eat too much, you'll get fat. And if you get fat, no one will ever love you. No one will marry you. You're gonna die alone." And I'm sitting at like 12 and I'm like, and then but then the flip side, grandma made you your favorite dish. Eat all of it to show her it was good. Show you appreciate, you know? Like, let's
mm,
celebrate, let's eat. But then it's, wow, you look really fat right now, but I made you your favorite. Like it's always it's a strange power dynamic where it feels like the body is not mine to own.
mm,
Like as if the rest of the family unit has communal ownership over it so they can say what they want about it, and that if I'm not losing weight, it's my fault.
mm.
Instead of, what does genetics have to do with it? What does malnutrition from post-war Vietnam have to do with it? Like we don't even talk about those things. It's more a moral judgment
Yeah.
and also a potential curse for the end of your life.
Yeah. What I'm sensing, what I'm analyzing is that the concept and understanding of body is not just a moral obligation. It's the way that it was portrayed in your family. It has a lot to do with history, generational trauma. But I can imagine that as an individual, as a young girl, I had no understanding of that. And so, where did all of that confusion go?
It went towards working out. You know what I mean? It
Yeah,
was going back to, well, I want the approval of my elders and they've shamed me and I'm wrong and it's my fault. So let me fix the problem.
it's my fault. So let me fix the problem. And like,
Absolutely.
was there language to your experience? Like, is that where writing went in, or like, what was the creative expression that came out of this, or did that come later?
Way later. I mean,
Yeah.
I never thought I was an artist or a creative or a writer. Like all the examples. I remember when I went to one of my first plays, it was a Shakespeare play sometime in like high school. And I fell asleep, like and I also fell asleep during the Nutcracker. Like I didn't relate to the content. And then it just felt like really hot and stuffy. And then I eventually would just like sleep because I was exhausted. Um,
Mm,
Turning this into art was never the intention. I was never allowed to talk about my family tragedy. I'm still kind of not allowed to do it now, to be quite honest.
mhm,
And I I I finally started trying to make sense of this and turn it into a play when I was on the brink of motherhood. And my dad and aunts were like, "You're not getting any younger. You just got married. You got to pop out those babies?" And I'm sitting there going like, haha, like, no, I don't want to have kids because of climate change. And then they're like stone cold Austin, like you need to fulfill like your Vietnamese daughter duty to like have babies. Otherwise you're not like a complete person? And I was like, how do I become a mom if I never knew my own? And if something goes wrong, who am I going to call? What am I
mm,
going to do? And so I was just kind of like, that's plot line A. And then plot line B, I was like, guys, I kind of feel like disappointed with the adult I became. And I kind of feel like a coward in my own life. I used to do stand up comedy. I got really heckled and then I quit.
mm,
How can I tell my kid, be what you want in life if I didn't myself? Because I knew I was going to tiger mom hard. You know what I mean? Because it's
yeah,
like, now you're middle class now, kid. Like, I'm paying for drama camp. How come you're not the lead? You know what I mean? Because I knew I would project. I
yeah,
knew I would project. And because of all the things I didn't get to have when I was a kid, for all the scholarship applications I had to apply for, all the times I had to forge my parents' signature so I could go do things that they said I wasn't allowed to do, like Girl Scouts. You know what
Mm,
I mean? Like, I
yeah.
wanted so bad to have these things, and now if my kid just gets handed it to him, but he doesn't actually really try, I was like, "Oh, shit. I gotta really deal with this baggage before I even become a mom." And
Mm,
that was the impetus of why I was like, "Well, if I sucked at stand-up comedy, how can I be a part of performance in a safe space?" And then I went into a solo performance class, and that turned into my one-woman show. I iterated it several times, and the 5th one became 140 Pounds: How Beauty Killed My Mother, where I play 15 characters in 65 minutes. I needed to answer this question. I needed to deal with our intergenerational trauma before becoming a mom. But how do you do that when the family's not gonna talk?
mm.
So I had
Have
to
you
I had to go find other ways.
Yeah, before we continue though, I want people to have an understanding of how your past being raised in a family with Vietnamese refugees did impact your view of motherhood. And I do want to go into your family work and your family history. So, how have your experiences as the daughter of Vietnamese refugees and your mother's story shaped your perspective on identity, resilience, and the American dream?
And with identity, it's like nothing was ever enough. Like I never felt
Mm,
Vietnamese enough in my household. I never felt American enough when I stepped out the door, right? It was always straddling these two worlds where I was trying to code switch, trying to fit in, and nowhere did I ever feel like I was going to fit in.
mm,
I remember in the nail salon, my role, because I'm not very coordinated with my hands. Like I'm kind of clumsy. Like they're
me
just kind of
too.
like hot dog hands. And so then my job was to entertain the customers when we were running late so they wouldn't leave. So it was in that moment I was allowed to be charismatic, energetic Susan. But when I was that at home, they'd be like, "Oh, you're too loud. You need to be a girl. You need to be like more put together. You need to be more dang wang. Okay? Like more like it's the word isn't formal, but it's like obedient."
Got that too. We're very similar in that way because my mom would tell me that all the time. Like, "You're too loud, you're too this." And then was that then the impetus of, like, hiding who you really were?
Girl, I tried to hide and it's just like a flower's got to bloom, you know what I mean? So like I would hide and thrive in secret. So
Okay.
I started doing a lot of community service stuff, student government stuff, especially after my mom passed. My dad thought I was like the most rebellious, disobedient child going to do community service, like he was just like, "What are you doing? Stop it. You stop it." And it's like, wow, it's just reflective of the times, right? Like he grew up in the Mekong Delta on a one dirt road, did not finish ninth grade, right? Trying to get into the Vietnamese college system is hard. Like it's based on a lot of testing. But then now you've transported your entire life to America with totally different education system and like what gets you into a more prestigious school. Like he just didn't know. But that was kind of the tension, right? Is always like I'm too American at home.
Mm,
I'm too much. And it was when I was doing all these other extracurriculars that I found like affirmation from basically white adults who would be like, "Good job." And I would be like
mm,
floored, right? Because I never got that positive recognition at home, like to this day, it's like people are like, "Oh, your father must be so proud of you." I'm like, "Girl, you do not know Vietnamese dads." Like don't put words in his mouth. Don't say my mom would be so proud of me. I'm like, "You don't know the dead." Let's stop, guys. Like Vietnamese parents, like there is something that I did benefit from these high standards, right? Which is like I live with high standards. And I've been criticized for that for my friends sometimes. They would be like, "Don't you think that's a little high?" And I'm like, "Girl, if we gonna potluck, we gonna potluck hard. Okay? Like
mm.
I'm here to optimize variety." So I think that's like I'm so grateful for my parents, like for me, I value being resourceful.
Mm,
I value manifesting what you want, having the courage to do what you want. Like, let's realize it. Let's take action. I like that is from them. That is completely from my parents, growing up in the nail salon, and we were all working there. Like, I've been
mm,
working there since I was 6 years old, right? And that was just a family unit. That was my daycare. That was my summer camp called the nail salon. And so I think that there was always something really beautiful about being so grounded to the home and family life, and dinner being a really sacred time. Like, sure, we didn't talk about vulnerable things, but we were always together. And I really value that time where there was consistency, because now I'm out in the world as an adult and I'm like, wait, you didn't have family dinner all the time with your family? People would be like, yeah, I just go home and heat something up. And I'm sitting there going like, wow, that now also goes back to how important food was to
mm,
show emotion, and also to be abusive, right?
mm,
Around like, you can't have it, you can have this, grandma's watching you. Like, there's so much control in a way with food and the family, but that's also
mm,
because the context. They grew up during the Vietnam War, post Vietnam War. We were poor. We were very poor. And when we came to America, we are also very poor. But food was that thing that you could count on for the day. Like, that was like sustenance that you could have and you could share together and be together. So the dinner table is very important to me, but it's also fraught with so much shame, right?
mm,
So I think, like, being a child of Vietnamese refugees, I'm so proud of that. I love that I do know where I come from. But for a long time, my elders did not want to talk about where we came from, right? And my mother's death only compounded that, because we just kind of dissipated as a family. After she passed, my aunts and grandparents moved out. My tie to being Vietnamese went away because my dad was just working all the time. And then I was just trying to get out of the house and graduate, right? So it was just, it's been something that I have felt embarrassed about, because I grew up in an all white community in Santa Rosa in Northern California. And now it's like the very thing that I feel so proud about that makes me very unique, right? Is because I
mm,
come from this amazing lineage of courageous immigrants that do have a very clear identity, that have very
mm,
clear values. Sometimes I don't agree with those values, but it is nice to be so closely tied to my heritage and to even know that.
mm. There's so much, like, even though your family never spoke about your mom after she died, remnants of why are were so persistent in your childhood. Messagings around your body, messagings around food, what you should have been. And then, like, how was revisiting your mother's loss at 30, like, almost an awakening for you? Because your point, like, you joined a cult, like, there was just a lot of, like, searching that you had to do after.
Yeah. It's in chapter 1 that I say, I was just disappointed with the adult I had become.
Yeah,
My dad was really pressuring me to get a master's degree. He was just like, "Master, master, how come you don't have master? Huh?"
yeah,
And I was
yeah.
like, "Oh my god, the only thing I would qualify for is an MBA." Like, I just couldn't, I wasn't going to get like electrical engineering, computer science. I was just like, "Okay, I'm doing this because you're still so disappointed in me." And it was like this last ditch attempt to really get my father's approval, because I was always upsetting him. Like, it didn't matter that I did go to Harvard and then eventually went to Yale to get my MBA. Like, it was just like never hitting the bar with him. And
Mm,
after I graduated from business school, I had a lot of loans. And folks, I used to work in the international development space and nonprofits, and folks in that space were like, please work in the private sector. Please get more training and bring those skills over. And I was like, okay. And then also with the loan forgiveness program, it was just really going to make more sense for me to go to private sector, even though I hadn't really ever worked in the private sector besides starting my chocolate company with my sister. But that's different. That's different than
Mhm.
working in corporate America. So I moved to Seattle. I have a job where I'm essentially a contractor to Microsoft doing data analytics consulting, which is so funny because I'm essentially a creative, right? So what am I doing there? But I
Mhm.
got a job and I'm
Mhm.
living this life for my dad that finally he's happy with me because I have a 401k. I'm finally giving him money every month, right? Because kids are your parents' retirement, essentially, right? He had a nail salon and then it didn't
Mhm.
do very well, right? Like that's our
Mhm.
obligation. And I hate my life. I totally hated my life. And I felt like I was the walking dead. I I hated the weekends because then I would think about going back to work. I was such an idealist and I would drive to work, listen to NPR, thinking about there's so much terrible things going on in the world. And what am I doing? I'm measuring how many clicks are on this website and trying to optimize click placement.
Mhm.
What has my life come to? And I was pretty sad about it and pretty sour about it, but I was like, I don't know what else I'm supposed to do. And it was really when I had gotten married and my aunt spirit channels my dead mom.
Yeah.
And my Korean in-laws are being WTF because they're hella Christian and they're like, that's kind of weird. Then my white business school friends are like, what? And then I'm just like, I'm chipper. I'm like, good, she showed up. Little late, but showed up. And it was that was the reckoning moment, right? Because it was like, now my mom is in the middle of the dinner party. And then I'm like, because years prior, I had actually tried to track down the plastic surgeon to rain
Yes.
hell on him and avenge my mother's death because now I'm not 11 anymore,
Mhm.
right? Because at the time when we were trying to sue him and he didn't have medical malpractice insurance, my dad, who is not a native English speaker, is deferring all the decisions to my 19-year-old brother in the hospital and also legally in the when we're trying to
Gosh.
sue him. Right? Because so now I'm a 30-year-old with 2 Ivy League degrees being like, no, now it's time. Now it's like Empire Strikes Back. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like this is time for us to rise up and do what my parents couldn't do for them at the time.
Mhm.
I find the doctor. He's still practicing. He's still on probation. And when I'm finally going to rain hell on him with Facebook ads that are strange, a billboard by his clinic, trying to get another expose written on him, trying to get a class action lawsuit from all the other women he mutilated,
Mhm.
I found out he died. So that it was after that, there's a line in the book, and I said, my back hit a wall. How do you have an enemy if your enemy is dead? And then I said, I do what everyone does when they need a distraction. I got married. So, so that led me to that moment where my mom is now being spirit channeled through my aunt. And I'm sitting there going like, oh, maybe she's trying to give me a sign.
Mm.
And then I just felt like that was the moment where I felt new life in me where I'm like, is she trying to tell me something? Because up until this point, I
Mm.
really didn't have a relationship with my dead mother. Mother's days were really
Mm.
hard. Her death anniversary was always really hard. But because no one ever talked about it, it just was easier just to pretend she was never alive.
Around. Yeah.
Yeah. And I said, that's how she truly died for me, is
Yeah.
because we just didn't talk about her. Um,
So
so
good.
it was the wedding day, that was kind of like the big turn for me because that's also when I got the pressure to have kids for my aunts and my dad. And I'm just sitting here being like, oh, I can't be a mother unless I like deal with all my baggage. And I can
Mm.
only deal my baggage if I return to the stage.
Mm.
And originally I was just going to do absurdist art, okay? Like my final for that solo performance class, I was wearing a rainbow poncho. I put raisins in everyone's mouth. The light went dark. I was meditating. I would touch a hammer. I would not touch the hammer. Am I going to kill you? In scene. Okay, that was that
Revenge. Symbolism.
it was
Yeah.
but you see, it was not about my family because I was not allowed to talk about my family. There was no it was like Even though the first day of class, they're like, tell a 5-minute story. And I was like, cool, I want to avenge my mother's death. So I went to look for a killer. Everyone was like, you did what? And I'm like, oh, you never done that? I was like, yeah, you should do it. Like it was so private. Like it was such a thing that I did on my own. And I could never tell anyone but my husband, right? Because I couldn't tell my family. But that was the big turn for me is coming back on stage, realizing the absurdist art. Yeah, I could do it, but have I then fully done my shadow work? Have I really
Mm.
processed with the demons of being rejected by a heckler, of being like not good enough, not being funny? Oh, who are you kidding? You think you're so great. All of that voice and judgment, which are really just echoes of my father,
Yeah, you
confronting
internalize the
that.
parent.
Yeah. And so I needed to confront that. And then eventually that show, when I really had 25 minutes on stage to do my first ever solo show,
Yeah.
it was called Dr. X, How I Avenged My Mother's Death. And I just, it was just all anger and rage, man. And I'm playing all my family characters on stage being like, I'm trying to find this doctor, but really my family can't. Like, but if he dies and I don't have an enemy and the only people who can give me closure is my family and they can't give it to me, that's a perfect narrative arc.
Yeah, it sounds
I
very
Yeah.
Jungian, like the same
Ooh.
person playing a different character. Do you know what I mean by that? Have you watched Joe versus the Volcano, where like Meg Ryan plays a different character in different parts of Joe's imagination? So
Ooh,
like I was
no.
watching an interview with Meg Ryan and she was saying that the movie eventually was actually inspired by Carl Jung, who realized that like identity is just in the contents of the mind, that we can actually embody different characters. And it's like the last character, Patricia, is the one that feels the most confident and the most herself. And I wonder, like, when you talk about chasing after your mom's doctor, whether or not that was like your portrayal of what your dad should have done, because you talk about how there was a lot of anger associated to the way that it was handled. You think that's what it was? Because it
Well, this is
doesn't,
some
just knowing you, there's just so much like creativity and humor that I'm wondering if that was actually you, or like the portrayal of what you felt like should have happened.
Well, I remember when I was in business school thinking, drumming up this idea that I would avenge my mother's death. I had called my dad and I was like, he's gonna be so excited. He's gonna be so happy that I'm doing this. And I
Okay.
told him that and he was upset. I was like, what's the doctor's name? He didn't remember. I was like, "You have paper." I was like, "I know all the papers. You put them in a bin. You put them in your closet. I know you have all the papers." And he was like, "I don't have the papers. I don't know anything." And then I was like, "Bah, this is how I'm going to get you money. I'm going to help you with your retirement. This is it." And he was just like, click.
Just hung up the phone.
Yeah, he was, yeah, very upset because it was trying to look at the past, right? And it's like, as you'll read into the book later, like it's just like my dad has dealt with countless trauma in his life,
Mm.
orphaned by the time he was 12, widowed, really struggled as a business owner. And he doesn't believe in therapy, right? Mental
Mm.
health is so stigmatized, especially for his generation.
Mm.
And they had also tried to escape Vietnam, and it was on the 6th attempt that they made it. So much unresolved PTSD.
So much.
So much, or like they want to stop going to school so they don't get enlisted in the army. Like it was just like a really different time for my dad. And we explore that in the book. We explore that because Asian masculinity does
Mhm.
not have a lot of benefits.
Right.
But what does a
It's
child and a parent want? Is just to be seen and understood.
I will say, like, your relationship with your dad, the more you talk about it, is reminding me of my relationship with my dad. Like, there was a moment, I think I had graduated from college. I got into every master's program I had applied to. I was in the honor roll, and my dad called me a deadbeat. at like 23, because I was like saving up money living at home. And he's like, what use are you? Like, you don't have a 401k, you don't have a savings, you don't have any of this. And it was, I didn't know it at the time, but since I've gone through my own work and I am a mental health therapist who also works with other Asian men, there is that projection that like comes out as a parent of you need to do this so that you'll be safe. And it's almost like this never-ending battle of I got it. Okay, that's not enough. Okay, I need to do this. It's almost like I'm curious, Susan, like when did it become enough for you? Like when was the moment that you went, gosh, like this isn't really about me. This is about your trauma. Was there a
Yeah.
moment?
Yeah. He said some interesting things to me over the years. I would say we've gotten to a much better place after I had a kid.
Mm,
I could see the greater context of like, don't like for me, I'm middle class. I only have one kid. I'm not trying to run a
yeah.
business, like sponsor over like 8 family members, do all this stuff, like, and not do it in my native language. Like now I see the context of what they were faced with. I now
Mm,
realize adults don't know everything, but
yeah.
as a kid, I thought they knew everything.
Mm,
And I also thought they were always right and I was always wrong. And so it was after I had a kid that I was able to have much more compassion for my dad and also to depersonalize it. I've seen him go in and out of like basically wanting me to give him sympathy about his life. Really, but he doesn't have the tools to do it. He doesn't use I statements. He doesn't say I feel blank, right? It's just I feel like you're dumb, right? Like that's what he can't say I feel like my own inner child has been neglected and that I've just been projecting it on you. I'm sorry. You know what I mean? Like that
mm,
my dad's never going to say that.
yeah.
And he's not
Yeah.
curious to go seek those resources out, right? So it's like
Mhm.
how do I keep expecting him to be someone and I'm chronically disappointed? Because really I'm not accepting him for who he is.
Mm. And that
I
happened when you held your kid for the first time, or like when you started caring for your child?
No, it's COVID after we had
Mm.
gotten our first set of vaccines. And I was like, I want we're gonna fly from Seattle to Houston. Like I want my dad to meet the kiddo. And on the plane ride over, I kept writing down because I had gone a therapy session beforehand and I wrote down all these like mantras or thoughts. I was like, I want this to be a good time because I don't know how much time we have left together. Like my husband was always like, you can literally count the number of times you're going to visit your dad before he dies. Like you can do a conservative estimate. So like, why don't we try to make this a good trip?
Mm. Your husband is close to his family,
I don't
sort
he's
of?
Korean.
Okay.
I don't know if it's close. I mean, I guess we're physically close. They live in Vancouver, but like my husband is a very practical, analytic data guy. And so he's
Mm.
like, let's just look at numbers.
Met at work?
No, we met at business school.
Okay.
And he, like just let's get really practical about this.
Mm.
And so for me, it was just kind of like, I don't know. I just moved to another stage in my life where I am now a mom. And we were in the middle of the pandemic, and I just felt like this was the right thing to do when it felt safe to do it. And I just really had my own turn of like, I want this to be better.
Oh,
Because I think a big part of this is like, I allowed myself to evolve and change over the years, but I kind of frozen my dad as the dad from high school. And
that's what
I
my
didn't
therapist said too.
let him thaw. I didn't allow him to also be a complex, functioning human adult and let him evolve.
It's good.
For the most part, he's probably stuck in his ways. But if I allow myself to accept my own ability to change, and really, I just want him to love and accept me as I am,
Mm.
I must also do the same. And so
Can I ask you
part of it
something?
was like, yeah, go for it.
When you're talking about your dad, you're able to conceptualize him with such compassion. I'm thinking about the women that are listening to this who might have a complicated relationship with their parent. What advice would you give them to reach a place of compassion if they do want to have somewhat of a relationship with their Asian parent?
Amazing question. Amazing question I've thought of for the last 3 decades.
Everyone go buy The Manicurist's Daughter.
Well, it's
It's a good book. It's like I haven't read much, but from what I've read, Susan is a prolific writer. Everyone, but go for it, Susan. Your advice.
I grew up watching Full House,
Mm,
and I really wanted to be Michelle. My dad was Danny Tanner, Bob Saget. I wanted that so bad. I loved how every episode tied up neatly in a bow, and then there was always a hug, and there was a great understanding. I just loved it and ate it all up. And ever since then, I've been measuring my father against what he actually can never be.
mm,
Because I thought, oh, if he behaves that way, then that means he loves me and everything is great. And for a long time, I was like, I want you to see me the way I want to be seen. Like, I want to be emotionally vulnerable with you. I want to be deeply connected to you. I want this intimacy into me. You see, I
yeah.
want that. I can have that with a lot of white people. I can have that with people in cults at personal growth workshops. I sort of
Hmm.
have that with my data analytics driven husband, sort of. But I want that with you. But here's the headline. It might not be possible.
Mm,
And I can want those things and I can try for those things. But my father and anyone is always doing a dance with us. And they're doing it with explicitly stated boundaries and inexplicit boundaries. And I think for a long time, I was dumb as a doornail thinking like, I didn't pick up on the indirect cues. I didn't understand when my dad got upset, when I would ask about my mom, and I would step on an emotional landmine about just asking, hey, why did she choose the name Jennifer? Boom, 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 boom. Like it would
mm,
set everything off. But I was just kind of sitting there being like, why are you so upset with me? Why are you blaming me? Why is it always my fault? What do I need to fix? What labor do I need to take on? And it was just so exhausting because no one would ever win. And I felt like the more I tried to be close, the more we would fall apart.
mm,
And so I think a big part in this is for me to really recognize what those indirect boundaries are and actually respect them
mm,
and not personalize it and being like, oh, he's being mean to me because he doesn't love me, because I didn't do everything he said. I must try to figure out a way to keep getting his approval. Like my husband was like, maybe your family isn't meant to be your friend, AKA wanting that emotional intimacy. And maybe can we live in a world where you actually don't ever get their approval?
Your husband is very challenging.
Oh
He
God,
challenges you.
I can tell you more about the body image stuff, but that's turning into my stand up comedy between me and him. I'm always like, I've never felt beautiful. I've never felt sexy. Tell it to me. He's like, feels a little forced. Anyways, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like, all
I
right, cat
do.
robot, you cat robot. But like the point in all of this is that can I meet my family and respect their boundaries? And it
Mm,
might not give me what I want, but can I honor their needs and recognize that I am doing my work and I am reaping my benefits outside of this call, outside of Christmas time. I am actually living a very fulfilling life for me. But
Mhm.
in these moments of interaction, because we can literally count them until their death, like you can conservatively estimate, like I don't call my dad every single day, right? But you can
Mhm.
estimate the number of touch points you're going to get by phone and in person. You can with your parents. You can,
Yeah.
especially if they live in different states, right?
Mhm.
Can I make sure that these moments that I do have, these very precious moments, are neutral to positive? I don't want to go in that negative territory anymore, but I said neutral to positive, meaning it's not going to be Danny Tanner. It's not going to be Danny Tanner. And I'm never going to be this like corporate CEO that my dad wishes that I could be because, right, he wants me to have stability. He's actually showing he's caring, but really he just says, "Why are you so dumb and you're a loser?" which is very
Mhm.
hurtful. And
Mhm.
that's a vocabulary he has access to. Fine. I'm never going to be that for him. So I'm always going to disappoint him. He's never going to be Danny Tanny for me. So we're always chronically disappointed. So what if I change the rules?
Mm.
What if I change the expectations? And the
Okay.
expectation is that if we see each other, we going to eat some peeled fruit and it's going to be crunchy and nice. We do
Mm.
not need to talk about any more childhood memories, bucket lists, who you were as a boy, your deepest hopes and fears for me. Like these are all things I want to know. And guess what? He made it loud and clear he don't want to tell me. So the time we have left, can it be neutral to good? Now,
Mhm.
so there's, you know what I mean? There's this like
Yeah.
radical acceptance around who I am and who he is.
Mm.
And can we just get a little bit closer in that acceptance actually?
How does that lesson with your dad translate into how you view being a good enough mom?
I'm a great mom. I'm a great
Mm.
fucking mom. I just spent like 7 hours putting candy eyeballs on little peppers from Trader Joe's
Halloween.
and little olives, and like little snap peas, put them in little oranges to make them look like little pumpkins. Because my kid wanted a not so spooky party.
Oh, how old is your kid now?
He's 4.5. But I can
Oh.
only do that because I stand on my parents' sacrifices.
Mm.
I'm steadily middle class. I am not worried about our future financially. I'm not worried about food on the table. I'm not. I got my worries, but it's
Mm.
such a different level of stress that I'm experiencing than my parents did. And
Mm.
they never could show up, to a field trip. Yeah, have time for that.
Yeah.
I had to beg for my birthday parties if I even got them that year. We didn't have money for that or time. So I'm kind of growing up as a mom now in a really different context, and it's with a lot more privilege. And I thank my father for that,
Mm.
right? I have honor and
Yeah.
gratitude for him for that. I am very cognizant about food and body shaming and
Yeah.
wasting food, right? But because my
Yeah.
kid would be like, I really want another bowl of this. Boom, eats one bite, done. And then I'm like, like every part of me is like activated around like wasting,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
I also want my son to be able to listen to his body and to
Mm.
trust his body and the knowing in his body.
Yeah.
I don't want him to do things because of how my eyes are twitching. You know what I mean? Like I want him to do things because it has taken me so long to come back to a place where I trust and know and feel my body,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
I'm
It's
very
taken me a
careful.
long time to
Yeah,
trust and know and feel my body. I know that feeling well.
right. Because
It's
earlier I said
I
the body was owned by everybody else.
yeah, but it took me working for Yellow Chair to realize that I had extreme body issues because I remember interviewing Megan, I interviewed a nutritionist, and they would break down like these are actually disordered eating beliefs. Like when you label food as good or bad. when you look at your waistline and you go, this is beautiful, this is not beautiful. Then even being aware of what dialogue I'm talking about around food, like so much of things are more psychological than we realize. And these like self limiting beliefs that just pervade almost everything. Like the moment you wake up in the morning, there are probably Rolodexes of things that go through your mind. But with that said, I want to be respectful of your time, Susan, because we're 2 minutes away from 2 o'clock. But the last thing I want to ask you about is when it comes to your body image as a mom, like what are some of the practices that you utilize in order to have a healthy image of your body?
Yeah. Numbers are interesting. Like
Mhm.
weight, like that's why my play was called 140 pounds, How Beauty Killed My Mother. I just wanted to tell everyone how much I weighed. Because actually that's how much my mom weighed. And on her medical consult form, she wrote she was 110 pounds. And the California Medical Board, when they were summing up what happened between her and the doctor, they're like, she lied. She lied on the form
Mm.
because that's the weight she wanted to be, right? She was getting a tummy tuck.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think numbers have so much power and it's so scary, right? But as I learned about being healthy and about like lifting weights and building mass muscle, like what does it mean to be 140 pounds versus 150 versus, it's like it's all a relative number. So I'm like, I'm slowly trying to release numbers, but I went to my physical the other day. I was 150 pounds. And I felt
You
it deep
flinched a
inside.
little bit.
Oh yeah. Cause
Yeah.
I was like, Susan, 140, that BMI, blah, blah, blah. You always want to be 125. Like I'm still deep down inside. I'm lying to you if I didn't tell you I want to really still be 125. Because also
Mm.
it's like, it'll go back to like literally being a healthier shape. Like
Mhm.
it's just, I have excess fat. Like I don't deny that, like
Yeah.
where I've got amazing calves.
That's
No fat on them.
awesome.
Oh, they're
I
huge.
just went back to weightlifting today, actually, no, yesterday. Susan, it took me forever. It took me forever to let go of weighing myself. Like to this day, I don't have a scale. Like I
Yeah.
will, even if I need it for the airport, I'll just like wing it. It like I will not. But because that is a huge trigger for me. Like it took me a long time to like unlearn all of that
Yeah.
messaging. And to this day, like if I feel bloated, I like it's automatic like, okay, what do I need to cut? What do I need to do? Like
Yeah.
how much do I
Yeah.
need to
Yeah.
work out? And
Yeah.
I literally have to stop myself and go, okay, let's slow down. Like I don't need to do anything. I'm just bloated. Like let me
Yeah.
just like
Just bloat.
I'm just bloated,
Just bloat.
you know.
But to answer your question, I used to go work out because one day I would be 125. Oh my God, that'd be so great. That'd be so great. But now
Exhausting.
I work out for my mental health, for
That's
my
good.
mental stability.
That
I go at
energy.
least 3 times because I know that's where my
Yeah,
best self is going to stem from.
that's
That's
good.
because otherwise, guess what? I'm just going to emotionally eat anyways to deal with
Mm,
anxiety, right? So, like, I think I just changed the definition of why I work out. It's for my
that's
mental
good.
health. I work out for my mental health. Period. Okay,
It's so life changing. Continue.
that's the first one. That's the first one. The second one is I just read this book, The Way of Integrity by Martha Beck. One of my coaches recommended it to me. And it was
Mm,
basically like, you want to be happy in life? Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie about if you hate your career, change it. If you're in a marriage and you're secretly a lesbian, get out of it. That was a woman's life example.
that's good.
But within it, there was all these affirmations in it. And it was like, you are infinitely precious. You are infinitely worthwhile. There is nowhere you have never belonged. You have never not belonged. You are lovable. You are loving. You are loved. And I wrote it down on an index card and I made 15 of them at my writer's retreat and handed out to the other artists. And then I slapped it on my car dashboard. And so every time I open my car, I read it and I go, oh, yeah, because I got to retrain my neural pathways so that because old dad still lives in Susan and is constantly parenting without him even needing to call me.
That's good.
I need to just keep feeding myself nourishing stuff that's going to work for me, because if not, the default record player going to play that song all the
Mm,
time. And I just need to keep feeding myself a new way of thinking, because constantly, as a human, what do I need? I want to be loved, seen, celebrated. That's it. That's it. And we're just so scared that we don't belong, that someone's rejecting us, that we're not enough. And I just need to
mm,
keep telling myself I'm more than enough.
that's good.
A lot of my worthiness has stemmed from my body shape. And guess what? I'm a pear. I am a pear, and
Sexy pear.
I do not look good in a Vietnamese ao dai. So here's what I did, girl. Listen up. I never really went shopping because I always thought I'd lose that extra 15 pounds. And so the only time I actually get clothes is when it's like used. Okay. And I just like kind of buy it. And it's like actually really, I have terrible fashion sense. I need to go shopping with my girlfriends more. I'd buy things that are on clearance and not really wear them because I have stuff just around like spending money. And am I like worthwhile to like receive and use that money instead of hoarding it later? Right. So what I've started is using a clothing rental service called Armoire. It's based in Seattle, it's nationwide. And I can buy, or I rent 7 pieces a month that are in season, fashionable, and my size. I don't need to wait to lose the 15 pounds and then I get something nice, because guess what? When I lose that 50 pounds, I'm going to be scared about gaining it. And then what do
Mm.
you do when you're period? You get, you're just like, and I just needed to remove this anxiety out of my life because I wasn't really even shopping that much anyways. And when I did shop, I just buy a lot of things on sale. Like the amount I'm spending per year at Armoire is actually way less than like the dumb things I buy and then donate later because I actually never really touch them.
Uh, there's there's nothing more attractive than someone who feels good in their body. Like not even like I for people that are listening, like I want you to imagine someone skinny and not confident. Like and I want you to imagine someone in a different body size and not confident. But there's something so like imagine the happiest person you know. You don't think about their body size. You don't think about how fat they are. You think about like, wow, their soul, their spirit is so beautiful because they dress with dignity, they talk with charisma, they love how they appear. It's just like you come off as that for me right now, Susan, of like, I can tell you've done the work on yourself because of how prolific and detailed and honest and integrous your writing is, but also how like you're just you. I like the word authenticity has been thrown around so much, but in closing our interview, I do want to just thank you for how vulnerable, like how much you just show people your wounds. You know, like you let the skin hang out, no pun intended. But
Yeah.
like I think we live in a culture where people are just so buttoned up. Like this is how much money I make. This is you do want to earn $3 million fast. Like here's how you do it. But to talk about the intimacy of your story, I think it's rare because now people understand their own. Like I understand my story at a more visceral level since encountering you. So I just like
Wow. That's awesome.
it's true. Like the specific is the universal, I feel. So the more specific the writing, the more universal the story becomes. Like even reading about your story with like soul searching, there was a moment I think I almost got into a cult in college. Like that's another story, but like I think everyone can relate to this feeling of like, I don't feel like I belong anywhere. And like, what does that look like to find myself and to channel like different parts of me, even if it's
Yeah.
something as weird as your aunt channeling the spirit of your mother on your wedding day? You know, it's like,
Yeah.
that's so specific, but also very universal, that feeling.
Yeah. Your aunt
Yeah.
getting attention on when she shouldn't. But, I do want to wrap with going back to body image. I did a
Yeah.
TEDx talk last year called How to Make Peace with Your Belly Fat. And the
Mm.
subheadline is How My Ancestors Slapped Me Around and slapped some sense into me in a sweat lodge. And,
Mm.
I think if you want to continue the conversation around my thoughts around that, for sure, check that out. Because
Yeah.
really, when you hate your body, you're basically saying you hate your ancestors and where you come from. And I just wonder, with that narrative change, would we consider it a different way? Right? Like
Mm.
that it's not just your own personal failure, which at the end of the day, I really do think people should work out at least 3 times a week. Like, it's actually just really great for
It's good
you.
for your
It's
mind.
so good for you. But
So much energy.
going back to 11-year-old, 12-year-old Suzanne not getting that second bowl of rice and how devastating that has been for the last few decades to unlearn, really, I deserve what I want.
Mm.
I'm worthwhile and I deserve what I want. But to actually say that, believe it, and live it, it's because I had to undo all that other trauma decades ago, right? From adults that also didn't have the tools. And now, as adults, we can do better for ourselves, for our children. And you said it, when we do the work ourselves, anyone we are interacting with at the grocery store, our friends, 40th birthday, whatever, we are always just rays of light. We are collective energy and we're absorbing each other all the time. So if you want inner peace, you want outer peace, you do your work. And hopefully that will heal your family.
Made it to the end of the episode. I think you deserve a thank you. Yellow Chair Collective, the podcast, wouldn't be anything without followers like you. I promise you that the production of these podcasts will continue to increase as the listeners increase and the followers increase. And so if you can do me a favor, if you found any value from this podcast episode, please give this a like, share, or subscribe to the show. It really helps us out. It keeps the word going and it helps our impressions. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next Friday.